Hello and welcome to Email and Coffee, where I get to geek out on everything email marketing. I'm your host, Joy Brooks, and today I'm really pleased to be talking with Matthew Smith. Hey, Matthew, how you doing? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, it's good to be here, Joy. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, my name is Matthew Smith, not Matt Smith. So I'm always telling people that. That's kind of a joke with my friends. There's too many Matt Smiths out there in the world. I currently live in Greenville, South Carolina, originally from Colorado. And I'm the founder of Really Good Emails and have a really fantastic team that supports that now. It's a side project. All of us still have full-time jobs, but we've really had a lot of fun and we're continuing to work on new things we're excited to release to everybody. And yeah, I'm passionate about email, and it started for me when I was head of creative on several VC-backed large SaaS product startups, and email consistently was one of the last things that people were thinking about, but I knew it was one of the most important because our customers are seeing the emails sometimes more than the product itself, the online product. And so, started really paying attention to that. And as I did that, I noticed that there were not many places where you could go and find the best of the best emails out there. So I wanted to provide that. So it's been a fun journey. I've been at this for about 6 or 7 years in email marketing and around 15 in design in general. So when I'm not doing really good emails, I run a company called Bunsen that provides design services for biotech and life sciences companies, because I care about where we're heading as a human race, and that way I can keep my work really meaningful. So it's great. I'm glad to be here.
I did know about that little bit there. A little bit of learning every day. Of course, this is Email and Coffee, and I'm drinking cold coffee. My little leftover from this morning. It's decaf. It's about time for decaf. What are you drinking?
It's interesting you say about decaf. For a long time, my go-to drink period was alcohol, and I gave that up 4.5 years ago. And then coffee became this, really paying attention to what I was drinking in my coffee, like getting the best beans, getting the best roasts, paying attention to all of those details. But recently I've had to switch to decaf because I've got some anxiety stuff that comes up, and it's, doesn't feel good in the body when that's going on. So I switched. And thankfully, there's more and more good decaf roasts out there these days. So this is a Greenville roast from a company called Bridge City that has a cool mission, and they do a pretty good job. So I'm pretty psyched on that.
Yeah, decaf's not so bad. I attest to that myself. So today we're going to talk a little bit about psychology. Around 1943, Abraham Maslow theorized that human nature is grounded in 5 core physiological needs. I'm going to share my screen to give folks an idea of what Maslow's hierarchy looks like. So let me just get everything in order here. So here we have the very bottom. By the way, Matthew, you can see the screen, correct?
You got it.
Good. I hate when tech things fall apart the same. So at the very bottom, we've got the physiological, the very basic needs of food, air, water, sleep. And then you start moving up and you go into safety, where we're talking about health and security and protection. Then love and belonging, where you've got family, friends, a sense of community, esteem and respect, which is more about the ego-driven belief that you are valuable and you are deserving. And then you finally move into the pinnacle, where it's self-actualization and you fully gotten to your potential. So Maslow's theory can be applied to marketing, and we can connect a brand with a customer and appeal to their basic needs, like this. You've got, Quaker Oats where at the bottom, it's the right thing to do. And Allstate with regard to safety, you're in good hands with Allstate. You've got Pepsi trying to get along. You're in the Pepsi generation community. You've got Royal Salute Scotch, what the rich give to the wealthy. And needless to say, the highest you can get, the US Army, be all that you could be. Now, we've all heard these, and we're all familiar with them. We may not have considered how they apply to Maslow's theory, but I'm wondering, Matthew, how Maslow's hierarchy of needs applies to email marketing.
Right.
And design.
Yeah.
So you want to speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, I would. So I give a talk called The Mental Inbox that deals with this a little bit. From when I think about design, a lot of people think about anything visual, but for me, it's capital D design, which means thinking about the entire package, and thinking about, what is the job of the email? What is the job of even the subject line, or the job of the visual design, or the job of the copywriting? The customer is hiring your email to do something for them, to solve a problem for them. And especially in our current scenario, mid-pandemic, our audiences are in a state of mind, state of being, where we're a lot of our day-to-day is actually down here in these, bottom 3 categories, if not the bottom 2. We're wanting to make sure that our physiological well-being and our safety well-being are taken care of. At different times, some of us have been able to move up the ladder, so to speak, or up the pyramid, but it's been a challenging time. And so emails can do, in their content, can do a lot to meet people where they are by using literary content or written content in a way that helps attune to people's challenges that they're facing, and not ignore that, not be tone deaf to that. And that's not just during the pandemic, but it also applies to some of the things that we're facing as a country, where we have, incredible polarity politically, where certain, groups of people in the United States, or even beyond, are facing humanitarian rights issues, racism, challenges, et cetera. So ways that we can meet those people and understand where our audience might be in their experience of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and then addressing those from a design perspective, a visual design perspective. One of the most important things that you can do is think about sort of the evolutionary picture of humankind. It's important to create clarity in a situation, because confusion can feel dangerous. Confusion often excites the amygdala and the, I think, sympathetic nervous system. And so when we're excited, like when we're in an excited state, we're trying to figure something out. So if you've heard somebody get upset on a confusing phone call with customer service, that's the sympathetic nervous system getting amped up. What do you mean? I thought it was this way. You said it was going to do this. What, now you're saying this? That kind of confusion, really gets that going. That's an uncomfortable state. Now, humankind can do interesting things and be very powerful within that state, but generally that's not the state we want to address our customers in. We want to get them into their parasympathetic brain, which is their more relaxed, slower thinking brain, where they can make better cognitive decisions. And so you can do that using visual design by creating simplicity, clarity, by reducing the number of things that you're trying to do in an email to their essential package, and really to have what I would think of as like a minimum viable job that this email needs to do, and then potentially some simple secondary or tertiary things that they can do. Most emails that we get at Really Good Emails that we reject and don't accept into our, what we call really good, are generally just too busy. That's one of the clearest factors. They're trying to do too much, and they include too many different types of typography or colors or design elements, visual elements, etc., so that it's just hard to read. It's hard to scan and understand in a short period of time. So those are the kinds of things that I think, apply to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The biggest thing, though, is just knowing your audience, so that, like if you have a significant other who's just been in a car accident, then that's not a great time to talk to them about maybe some relational issues you're having with them, or talk to them about the next vacation that you're going on. That's a time to listen to how they're feeling, because they're down in the bottom of these, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Knowing that about your significant other is important, but also knowing your audience so that you can really attune to what they're experiencing. That's the most important thing.
Yeah. These are difficult times, and we are basically hitting the lowest two levels. But there is a certain amount of community also, because we're all shut out of community. So there are many ways email marketing can storytell using these methods. The top two, where you're basically actualizing yourself, so your customer is being all that they could be with your own product. That's a tough sell. But the basic three bottom are, easy storytelling, comfort. Like you said, the design element is clean, it's clear. You don't want to confuse your customer. You don't want to put them in that excited space, because they don't know what to do and they don't belong anywhere.
Right.
So, as a graphic designer, you're tasked with getting a message into a design with a CTA, and that's a call to action, within the HTML stack. Now, designers don't code, so they're not necessarily aware of that stack and how to address a design in the stack. So they might be likely to apply a brochure or a full 4-color advertisement, or even a package design, and work it into an email. That doesn't always work. How does the designer apply everything that they've learned to email marketing specifically?
Sure.
Get through the noise.
Email is a unique medium. It's different than the web, and as you're pointing out, it's different than print. I would say my experience these days is that many designers do code, and that's or they have a better and better understanding of how HTML works. But understanding how email HTML works is another unique beast, particularly because of the need to meet a lot of the Outlook audience and so on and so forth. But email as a medium, more and more is read in the mobile experience. And so that's extremely critical. When you're on mobile, then that also means that people are in a mode that is not a long form reading mode. Generally speaking, that's not always the case. Certain emails can be effective for that, but generally people are in a utility mode. They're ready to read your email and get going. And so email on the whole, is a place to summarize content and lead people toward things that are appeal to them more. So whereas a brochure, for instance, a printed brochure has to cover, all the ground. It has to tell you the whole story. An email does not. An email can be a high level summary of a set or an array of topics, and then, give people an opportunity to move to, a website, to finish a, checkout, to complete an action, to read more about something, those kinds of opportunities. And then, when you're in a utility mode, again, to my point earlier, when you can be simple and effective using visual treatments like hierarchy, then you help people scan to see what they're interested in more quickly. So most people can relate to a visual hierarchy, thinking about going to, a newspaper website. You and I are old enough that we actually remember newspapers. And so, you open a newspaper and you see the front headline, and that they've created greater hierarchy on the articles they want you to read first. And so you can use visual hierarchy through bolding headlines and through, making your body copy slightly lighter, still accessible and dark enough to read, but slightly lighter. And you can really help somebody be able to look from a high level, what's in this email? Oh, it wasn't point 1 or 2, but it's point 3 that I'm really interested in. Okay, now I'm going to dive in on that. So those are some of the ways that we try and, think through email design. But all of that is predicated on the hope that you know your customer already. So instead of guessing at what your customer might be needing or wanting, it's appropriate that you actually spend the time getting to know them through surveys, through phone calls, through analytics, and seeing what kinds of actions that they take, and then potentially even personalizing your email to begin addressing their unique needs. And a good example that I often use is my friend Jorge was at uh, um, a shop called Reverb, I think, which was all about selling used musical instruments. And at one point, they had a sales email that would go out that would talk about all of the different sales across categories that they had. And then they started being able to pay attention to who was purchasing what, and then they segmented their audience into different groups. So, this is a drummer, this is a guitarist, this is a flautist, whatever. And then you start sending that person hierarchically more important information that identifies with them, and their sales went up by 12% or something like that with that small change. And so anything that you can do to be, a better listener, ultimately that's what that is, right? If you and I become friends and you consistently are talking about, how important your vegetarian diet is to you, and I always bring up, what it's like to be a ranch hand and slaughtering cows or whatever, that's insensitive. And it's, sensitivity sensitivity aside, if I'm in a sales position, that's especially bad. I'm not attuning to what you need or what you want. And so when we can do that, when we can personalize better, we're actually we're mirroring is the psychological term. And that actually has the opportunity to trigger something called mirror neurons in the receiver's view. Now, there's never been a study on whether that happens in email marketing, but there's been plenty of studies to show that it works very well when you are communicating. And it actually releases something called oxytocin. And oxytocin is a bonding chemical. It's what is released in mothers and children, for instance, when they are talking to each other at an early age. It's what's released in couples when they are, communicating and connecting. And so when you can do things like that in your relationships with your customers, there's, you know, an opportunity to have some of that oxytocin flowing and create that bonding
Good
relationship with them.
juice. Yeah, you know, it's once you've got all of the background elements of your email together, so you've got your writer, you've got your designer, you know, you've got the marketing team all together. It's not, you shouldn't forget about all that data that's coming out of the back end. And the strategy should start up front, where maybe your campaigns are general to start with, but you start driving your campaigns so that the data that you're coming out can further segment and really dig into all of the different profiles and personalities and behaviors of all of your customers. So, you know that they wear sneakers because they've purchased sneakers.
Right.
You know that they wear high heels because they purchase high heels. So odds are, you're building a profile about somebody. And it's not difficult to take a moment every week to take a look at that data with that cup of coffee, decaf or otherwise, just to see the trends, to see the stories, to see what that data is telling you, because you could come up with some interesting campaigns that are off the grid. Once you start getting that data, you may not realize who your customers are. You may say, oh, my demographic is 50-year-old men. And then suddenly you realize, wait a minute, where are all these women coming from? They're buying stuff for their 50-year-old men. So the message comes slightly different, yeah. So, considering all that you're a designer, considering all the skills and elements, how can you distill those skills and elements into email marketing, where you're trying to be the stack, you're trying to get a CTA across, but you still want to be creative, you still want to be exciting, you still want to be slightly glamorous? How do you do that?
I think the way that I work on some of these kinds of things is to set a constraint early and upfront. So I like to play a game called Design Golf, and it's basically get the lowest point score possible. So every time you use a different font, every time you use a different color, every time you have a different visual treatment for something, that's an additional point. And when you're in communication design, every point of difference asks the user's brain to interpret that difference. Why this difference? And if that difference isn't doing a job by saying, okay, this button is different than this other one because it's less important. Okay, that's doing a job, right? We have like a filled in button, and then we have a ghost button with just an outline. Cool, doing a job, great. Do we need a tertiary style for a button? Probably not. So it's not doing its job then. Do we have a different kind of rule or like a divider? Do we have 2 or 3 of those? Why? Is that necessary? And so by reducing, getting down to the simplest form possible, then you're helping people to concentrate on what's the real intent and potency of the email, which is the content, right? Like you can fancy up a design or an email all day long, but at the end of the day, a text-based email probably is effective on its own. And so figuring out how to make it better with the visuals, not more distracting with the visuals. So starting simple, and then, looking for a way to make the email something unique with about 5% effort. Usually it's just doing, something with an image, like making an image into a GIF using Canva or something like that. But again, generally speaking, most of the emails that I get into my inbox that people submit, they're just too busy. They're too much. They've tried too hard. There's too many grid points. It's not scannable. It doesn't serve the customer. It feels like it's more about the designer or more about the business than the customer. So the biggest thing for me is just to get simple. And there's some great examples on reallygoodemails.com that you can go see that are simple and effective. So that's my priority. And then, if you want, you can also get interesting results by being more interactive in your code. If you're further along in your email journey and you know what you're doing, you can do some really interesting things. Google recently released an email for their Nest Home product that was fully interactive, where you were able to choose a different color and choose which how many you want, and then uh, select a CTA, and it took you to a checkout page. Like, that was really next level. And obviously, what's interesting is, if you think about it from web technology, it's like, what's the big deal? This has been available on the web for ages. And if we could just get rid of some of the protocols, in email, and adopt a unified system. AMP is, problematic because of its ties to Google and so on and so forth. But it is exciting to think about where we could be going. But on the simple end, you can just make a hover state on a button, is a nice touch. So those are the kinds of things that I recommend people do. But generally, I'd say 90% of people are doing too much. So it's not about doing more, it's about doing less better.
Better. In marketing, we do overthink everything, and we look at emails in a completely different way than everyone else. So I remember Jason Rodriguez had a show where he was talking to his wife, and he said to his wife, what were some of the subject lines of your emails today? And she was like, huh? What? And most people don't.
Right.
Subliminally, yes, they do impact you. So you'll see the subject line, you'll see the pre-header, you see it, but you're looking at the brand. It's Disney. I'm opening it. It's,
Right.
Did they catch you with the subject line? Possibly. I'm not saying not, but I'm saying it's often the brand that's getting the recognition and not the subject line. And it's often the cleanliness of the email that drives the person to read it and interact with it, other than all of the, the flashing lights and the colors and the print, slice and dice and all of these things that you go through. It's that simple story that brings you down to the bottom, that gets you the click, that gets you into the conversion mode, or whatever it is. Yeah, I do think that marketing sometimes over markets themselves. They try to use all of the those golden objects one after the other. Okay, we'll do it this way, and then we'll test this. It's almost like A/B testing. Sometimes, yeah, an A/B test is a great thing, but A/B testing yourself to death gets you nowhere. So any tool that you overuse, anything that you overstate, any color that's used too often, a button too often, anything, everything in moderation, even email marketing. Last words, Matthew. What books, what influencers are you following these days?
Yeah, it's a good question. The books that I would recommend that people check out are Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud. It's a really interesting book, written in a comic book format, actually, but it teaches you the visual language, so that you can understand the role of color, the role of angle and dimension and shape and form and texture and movement, or perceived movement, to get, to communicate what you're trying to communicate in email or otherwise. And then the center of communication design is typography. And so reading Elements of Typographical Style by Robert Bringhurst, or Web Typography by Richard Rudder, either of those are going to be really effective at helping you understand how to use typography. And if you can learn typographical techniques, that's going to serve you, really well in your design work. And that's even for non-designers. I think it really helps for copywriters and for people trying to understand how to communicate. In terms of influencers, these days for me as a designer, I I'm more interested in photography or architecture. Um, there's a blog called Colossal that I really enjoy following because they show me architecture and artists and photographers and give me an insight into what's beautiful in the world. And that's often the most inspiring for me. I really enjoy letting kind of the natural world inspire the work that I do. So that's where I'm at these days. I always enjoy the Email Geeks Slack channel to hear what people are saying out there and how people are doing. Um, and this is a little bit of eating your own dog food, but anytime I'm designing an email, I'm actually using reallygoodemails.com, and I'm glad that we have a repository of over 7,000 emails, that have been curated by us to show, what's good practices, what are some things, and we're always working on new ways of teaching the community, what we believe are the best of the best. So having a lot of fun.
Yeah, I have to admit, Really Good Emails is my go-to, and it's my go-to for anybody that is any designer that's asking me a question of what I should be doing, or if I see that they're going off on a rail, I'll say, here's Really Good Emails. And I'll pick out a category for them, and I'll try to curate it for them. And they're always very appreciative. And it's somewhat enlightening because designers may not know about all of the email, accessibility, dark mode. They may not know about the stack. It really may come to them as some sort of a light bulb in their head when they see the stack in motion, and it's not a dirty word, and they understand how they can work within that,
Right.
That medium, because it may not be glamorous, but it can be very exciting when you get that conversion, when you actually see it happen in motion. And that's the point. While, with a print magazine, you're a designer, you design that 4-color print, it goes in the magazine, you don't really interact with it. Maybe you get the magazine, you open it up and say, look what I did. You put it on your coffee table, you leave it open, maybe it goes on your wall, but you don't interact with it. Email is interacting the moment it gets out. It's a vehicle right into a customer's hands. And for a lot of people that do design, they're communicating. So they get to do that on a level, an instantaneous level, type. It's very interesting. I appreciate, you being here with me today. And like I said, I learned a little bit about you. And how can people find you on the web? How can they interact with you?
Great. Yeah, reallygoodemails.com is a great place to be. Twitter.com/reallygoodemail. We ran out of characters to do the S, and Twitter doesn't allow that. So, and then you can also find me individually at twitter.com/whale, like the animal. And yeah, I'm always open for questions, and just love to be as helpful as I can be.
Great, Matthew. Thanks so much for being here. And that's a wrap.
All
Happy
right.
email marketing, y'all.
Thanks, everyone.